Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We're back. We've got some things to discuss, a lot of news in the NHL, a lot of things sort of hanging out there, a lot of decisions to be made, players still unsigned. We'll all talk about that in the next hour. But we will start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so tonight's home run derby for the All-Star game, and I believe this is their biggest ratings grabber. I think Pete Alonso has sort of like revived the event. He's won it twice in a row. He's going for 3. Nobody's ever done 3. I'm not going to tell you right now if I think he's going to do it or not because I wrote about it and people can go read it on Full Press. But I think he'll make it to the finals, and I think, the guy he goes up against will be very tough. But it's a good field. I did kind of laugh that Pujols is in it because it's like, I don't think he stands a chance. Like, it's just – but it's nice, fine. If you're going out that way, that's okay. Corey Seager is an interesting one because he used to play at Dodger Stadium. Maybe he knows a few things. But, I think it's going to come down to the big guys. But what's interesting is I don't think if a guy like Alonso, like if he wins 3 times in a row, he'll go for 4. Like, he's not one of these guys like in the NBA that if he wins the slam dunk, he's afraid of getting hurt. Or if he's like Aaron Judge and doesn't want to get hurt doing the home run derby or messing up his swing. He is not afraid of any of that. And none of it has affected Alonso. Like everybody always said over the years, you can't do it. And, this year Alonso's the major league leader in RBIs with 77, and he's got 26 homers. So it can be done, but we'll see. It should be fun.
Kev, I believe in consistency, and I'm consistent in my disdain for all-star games. The fact that I didn't even know where it was. I didn't know that Corey Seager was going back home. I'm sure he'll get a nice reception because he took the multi-millions and went to the Texas Rangers and is hitting 240 with about 20 home runs. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't hate the Major League All-Star game. It's probably the best of the 4 major sports, but it just doesn't do anything for me anymore.
Yeah, I still enjoy it, although I'm not committed to watching it. To me, the romance of the game is rooted in when I was a kid, and I've talked about this before. Now we know everything about every major leaguer and every minor leaguer. We start learning about them when they get drafted. The draft is now on television in Major League Baseball, even though we don't know the players, but you learn about them, pretty quickly. But back when I was growing up, we didn't know a lot about the players. So to see an all-star game, to see National League players, you didn't see them very often. It was a lot of fun, and it was competitive. And it remains competitive. It's one of the few games where you can play at a hard level and not risk too much injury. Certainly you can't play the way you would in the NHL or pro football. You can't do that. And the other thing is, too, for older people like me that remembers the series, the home run derby where, you'd get major league stars and they'd come out and they'd interview them and play games. I mean, it just sort of the home run derby and the All-Star game sort of reminds me of that. And
Mickey Mantle versus Willie Mays.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a lot of fun. The interviewing was just atrocious back then.
And that guy smoked too, I think, when he was doing it.
Yeah, no, it was bad in that regard. But again, you didn't get to see. No. I grew up in an American League city. I didn't get to see National League players. When I saw, I've told this story before, Lou Brock in 1968 for playing for the Cardinals. The dog just walked in the house. It was exciting. Like it was like he was from a different planet. Like we didn't know who he was, So it was a different time.
But I guess that's where growing up in New York, you had both teams there. I was close to both places. So I never felt that way. And actually, I could watch both teams, and I did for a long time on both. There were 2 channels. You could watch, Mets or Yankees almost any day of the week.
Yeah,
so I had that at my disposal.
I was just about to say because Buffalo is not a major league town, and we didn't get the Blue Jays because of Canadian cable and they were within 90 miles, so I think they were blacked out in Buffalo, which was just brilliant. But on WOR, we used to get National League games because we got the Mets. I got TBS out of Atlanta, and I got the Yankees on PIX. So I was able to see National League teams and American League teams at the same time. So I had the advantage of that. Only until like the super stations came around did you really start to get the fans started to see all these teams. And like I said, I love the All-Star game back in the 70s and the early 80s when you didn't see those teams and you'd see Dave Parker throwing out somebody from the corner at the corner and right field at the Kingdome. But now it's just like you see these guys all the time. You got the major league, you've got the ability to watch these guys every day if you want to, and it just has lost a little bit of the romance.
And that's why I think Home Derby's got a little more excitement. Sometimes it gets long and drawn out, don't get me wrong, but I do think it's got more excitement in the sense that the players are talking while it's going on. They're sort of giving interviews. You see someone like Alonso who really doesn't care about anything, and he's still hitting homers, and then everybody else is going to be chasing him. Like I think that part is still that same kind of fun that we all used to have, even just watching the game. The game now, I probably just watch for the introductions, see my guys, and it's on in the background.
I agree with you, Mike. I don't think it has the same value that it had before, but I think the Major League Baseball has done a good job of selling it. The prospect game has grown in popularity.
Except they made a mistake on that one, Kev. People complained they streamed that at an extra cost yesterday. The futures game, and that's this is a sport that really does need to market their next generation, and they don't do a very good job of it. And making people pay for it was a bad idea, I think.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. I had to watch it, but I didn't know that. So
yeah,
that is a bad call.
Quick thing here, just I have to show my. And I will not name the place, the business that the certain a pizzeria that I bought it from. I'll let people in the Buffalo area draw their conclusions. But I had friends in town. One who he was a teacher. He was in China for 3 years, so he was stuck there because he was in Shanghai where they had shutdowns because of the pandemic. He finally got out of China. He was in Buffalo visiting relatives for a week and a half. So he wanted to get pizza and wings from a very prominent place in Buffalo. And, I do realize that the price of things have gone up. The price of wings, there was apparently some sort of national wing shortage. So I expected to pay a inflated price. For a sheet pizza of cheese and pepperoni and 50 barbecue wings, I will bring it to the panel. Russ can't guess because I told him the price. Kev, what do you think the price of a sheet pizza and 50 barbecue wings was at this particular?
It's like The Price is Right.
$60.
That was the price of it on the menu 3 years ago. We called up, said sheet pizza, 50 wings. How much? $111.
Wow.
I almost canceled it, but it was the last time he was going to be here for a year, and we just said we'll splurge. But my God, and it was good, but no pizza and wings ever made should cost over $100. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how this business survives, because as soon as somebody says that, I would hang up the phone and say, unless I had given up my phone number, which I already did. All right, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, July 18th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology, and that's like 120 Canadian, Terry.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
It's more like 140. And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Okay, let's start. There were a couple trades over the weekend, and fairly prominent trades, names that we had mentioned a bunch of times ever since even going back before the trade deadline. So let's start there. And the team that was central, Kev, to the weekend trades was the Pittsburgh Penguins, who kept everybody. I mean, Malkin re-signed, Letang re-signed. They brought the gang back.
Yeah, and then they got older.
And then they got older because the two trades that they made, they traded John Marino, who's in his 20s, he's still relatively young, to the New Jersey Devils for Ty Smith, a young defenseman, and a third-round pick. And then they flipped Michael Matheson, who they got from Florida in the deal for Hornquist a couple years ago, I believe. for Jeff Petrie and Ryan Poehling. So, Kev, now the revamped Pittsburgh defense includes Letang, Dumoulin, Jeff Petrie, Jan Ruta, who won 2 Stanley Cups with Tampa Bay. And I look at their defense, and I don't know if it's better, but it's different.
Well, it is different. I think it is better, though, if you believe that the Petrie we saw after St. Louis took over as coach is the Petrie we're going to see this season, because he played much better, and he played well defensively for Marty St. Louis. And I think that's what the Penguins are thinking. Once he gets here, the team's going to be competitive again, and they'll get the most out of him. But, he's up in age. His best hockey is probably behind him. There's no question about that. I liked the trade, though, from Pittsburgh. I really did. Matheson, you know what you get for him. He's an offensive player that, probably shirks some of his defensive responsibility in the name of taking chances. So, and I think they needed to be better defensively. And I think that's what that was about.
Yeah, I think they got better defensively. I like the actual swap with Ty Smith because there's still upside there. And I do think he could play better defensively than Marino. I think they just knew they couldn't pay Marino, so they traded him because he's been putting up numbers and doing very well. Ryan Poehling could be a steal for them. If he's out of the post-concussion phase, like I think he might be, this is a guy who can put in 15 goals. Like he could be a better version of Zach Aston Reese if he is healthy. He's had trouble staying healthy, but he has an offensive game that's really good, but he just has never gotten on track.
Yeah, and Marino hasn't been the same player since he had that breakthrough season when we were all talking about him. He just hasn't played at that level again. So I think they had I don't want to say they gave up on him, but I think they did.
Well, it's also like the Devils gave up on Smith. Like, this is a guy who I thought, but again, the Devils went for sort of like a now move. Like I think the Devils feel like if they get any kind of goaltending, they're going to be in the race, and they might be. But I don't understand what you would give up on it. And look, Marino's not old either, but you are going to have to pay Marino quicker than you're going to have to pay Smith. And that's because he's a college player and all the other things that go with that.
The Devils.
I don't understand the methodology of it from the Devils' standpoint.
I think it was to improve now because Marino's an established player and he's under contract for another 5 years at 4.4.
Oh, he did sign long term. Okay.
Yeah, and plus, if they, if that might be insurance against Severson leaving because he's entering the final year of his contract.
Yeah, that will be another mistake. I do want to point out. And Devils fans, I think, will agree with this. Like, Severson had a really good year last year. He had 46 points. Mm-hmm. He is capable. Like, he has a really good shot. He is capable of doing well on the power play. But, of course, once you got Hamilton, that kind of pushed him aside a little bit. They haven't known what to do with Damon Severson for 3 seasons now, it seems, because they made him a defensive guy one year. He's done everything they've asked. I think the next place that he goes to, he's going to end up being like a 50-point player, and he's just not going to do that with the Devils because they just kept moving him around.
Yeah, I mean, Kev, right now it's like we're a little under a week out from the beginning of free agency, so you could start to sort of take stock at what a team did in terms of players moving in, players moving out. And if you look at the big movers and shakers, and we started to say this on Free Agent Frenzy Day. Detroit and Ottawa were arguably the 2 biggest because, starting with Ottawa, they bring in DeBrincat, they sign Norris, they bring in Cam Talbot, they sign Giroux. They had a lot of room for improvement and they added a lot. But the question is, and there's no doubt that they improved, but the question is now, did they improve enough to be somebody who could be in the playoff mix? And unless they improve their defense a little bit, I do admit that Sanderson is an unknown factor because he's such a talent, but I don't think they're deep more than maybe 3 defensemen, and then the bottom part of their defense is not good. And I think they still need to improve defensively if they want to contend for a wild card spot in the East.
Yeah, I mean, if they get in on the Klingberg sweepstakes, that would help, for sure. I'm not sure they did enough to get in the playoffs, but I really like this team. I like what they did, and you never know if the Bruins get off to a slow start because of the fact that Marchand and really there were a lot of guys hurt.
McAvoy and Riley.
Got a lot of guys that either may not be ready or could be off to a slow start because they're trying to recover from injury. So, I mean, I think it's possible, just not probable, that the Senators can make the playoffs. But I think we saw free agency work the way that a salary cap is supposed to work, which is, the top teams that are sort of capped out, they were mostly subtractions. I thought the Carolina Hurricanes, by getting Max Pacioretty and Brent Burns, and just in terms of acquisitions, they actually were on the plus side. But most of the contenders, including the Rangers, because I love Trocheck, but they couldn't sign Cobb. And Ryan Strom went to the Anaheim Ducks. So, they're kind of
probably gone. Maybe Mott comes back, but that's it. So they've lost.
So they lost players too. So most of the contenders, including the Stanley Cup champion Colorado team, lost their number one goalie. I know they're working to try to get Kadri back, but that may not happen. Florida lost players; they didn't get Giroux back. Tampa Bay, they've lost significantly in Palat and Ryan McDonough. So that's the way it's supposed to happen. None of the contenders, other than Carolina, benefited from free agency, and plenty of bottom teams. I mean, Columbus gets a superstar, a franchise scorer, and Gaudreau. Anaheim improved their team with Vetrano and Ryan Strom. The Red Wings and Senators we mentioned. Even the Buffalo Sabres, added a kind of a sneaky good goalie who's right now escapes me, the
Eric Comrie.
I think he could actually help them.
I thought that move was, don't get me wrong, he had a good 16 games as a backup in Winnipeg. It's just, they seem to be looking, we were talking about this on the Off the Post show yesterday with Joe Yerdon. They seem to be settled on what their goaltending situation is going to be 3 years from now, because they have these prospects in Devin Levi and Eric Portillo. But the problem is they don't know what the goaltending is going to be next year and the year after that. They don't know about Luukkonen. They go out and sign Comrie, who's been on waivers 3 times, who's in Detroit, who's in New Jersey. He came back to Winnipeg. They don't know about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. So they're sort of and they're like Detroit, Kev, where they've got a bunch of good young players. I went to their development camp. Power is going to be really good. Jack Quinn looks impressive. Peterka. They have a good crop of young players, but if you don't have the goaltending behind it, then you're just going to be giving up.
Yeah, Kev, that's the thing. It seems like the bottom has all moved up, but in the end, we talk about it. I'm willing to say Columbus is now a playoff team, but I'm not willing to say most of these other teams are playoff teams. But what will happen is you might not get 100 points this year if you were a team that got 100 last year.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment. We may not see a changing of the guard in terms of the playoff teams, but they're going to narrow the gap. And if there's any faltering, they'll be there to take advantage of it.
Of the 8 teams that made the playoffs last year, Kev, I think the 2 there, and you never know this, because if somebody gets hurt, then a team that had 115 points or 120 points could finish out of the playoffs. But right now, on first blush, the 2 teams that I think are in trouble starting in the East are Boston because of the injuries, and maybe the Washington Capitals. I don't think Dylan Strome is an accurate or an adequate replacement for Nicholas Backstrom. And honestly, I know that Samsonov and Vanacek had their issues. But Darcy Kemper, even though he won a cup, he was injured a couple times, and that's what I always go down the same road with the Kemper. Yeah. I think their backup now is Charlie Lindgren. And it's like if that happens, you're finishing out of the playoffs.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you there. I just think back about I don't think we appreciated at the national level how poor their goaltending played in the regular season. to the point where, and there's video evidence of this, where basically, Brian McClellan, their general manager, said he wasn't going to do anything at the trade deadline because their goaltending was just too bad. There was total frustration. And I think Kemper changes all that. And I really admire McClellan. How long have we asked the Buffalo general manager to do something about Buffalo's goaltending, and they just kind of have refused to do it. McClellan went out and got the Stanley Cup winning goalie. So, and I do think Dylan Strom, while he's not Nicholas Backstrom, I mean, he certainly can help. I think there's a big question of whether he's a third-line center or a second-line center. Certainly wasn't a first-line center like he was playing last year. But could he get 20 goals? Yeah, he could get 20 goals. I don't know whether they're vulnerable or not. It's kind of hard they're always a hard read, Washington, because they always play better than you think. And Ovechkin still sort of carries the day. So, you never know, is this the year that he's going to decline a little bit?
I'm not worried about Washington. I think Boston, even though last year I wasn't bullish on him, Swayman, I think, has won me over that he could get the job done as long as Krejci and Bergeron are there. That has to happen. But I still look at the Islanders. Well, even though they got Romanoff, they didn't do anything offensively. They have a new coach. Sorokin's going to have to be a top 3 goalie in the league if they make the playoffs.
Yeah.
You think they're done? Because I don't even think they're close to done.
Well, I think they're trying, but I think Lou is having a hard time, like everybody else, moving salaries of guys that he's been talking about for 2 years moving. That's the hard part.
I've heard that they might be in on Kadri, but they don't have the cap space.
Right.
It's like, if you could jettison, and I'm saying jettison in terms of clearing cap space, not that he's not a good player. If you could jettison Josh Bailey, then you'd have enough cap space with what they have right now. On top of, they're going to need money to sign Noah Dobson as an RFA. And Kev, I don't think that this year the agent for like a Noah Dobson is going to say, "Oh, sure, Lou, we'll wait till September just before training camp to take what you have left." No, he had 50 points. I want to get paid, and if I'm not saying it's going to be a holdout, but he's got to weigh that. That was your best defenseman, and I don't think that anything's changing there. So they've got to get him signed, and if they need to make a move, then they have to have the cap space to make that move too.
I would say that Lou Lamoriello's history of player relations, despite the fact his reputation of being difficult, is actually probably better than average.
Yes.
He tends to have very good relationships with players and with agents. I think the Dobson thing will get worked out. What I'm hearing is happening is he does indeed have a way to get Kadri, but he doesn't want that trade. He'd have to trade a player he doesn't want to trade, and then he has to weigh Kadri for the player I got to give up to get Kadri, and he doesn't like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know who it is, but that's what I've heard, that he, player teams have come back and said, "No, we don't want that guy. We'll take this guy off your hand for whatever."
We want Matthew Barzal. Everybody does.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the player. No. But he just doesn't like the trade he can make. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to see what Kadri's options end up being. I took note this morning, and it's a little misleading, but there are 13 teams who have less than $2.5 million in cap space. When you add in the teams that have less than $5 million, you're beyond the halfway mark. And then when you look at the number of people that the bottom teams have signed, like the Red Wings have 25 players under contract. They're not going out and getting anyone else. Because they'll end up, won't know what to do. They have a couple of guys that are hurt that at least sort of they won't start the season, but they're going to have issues in December. And plus you want to bring some rookies in. Well, there are a bunch of teams like that. I think half the league has 20 or more players, NHL players already under contract. So in addition to being a shortage of money, there's a shortage of roster spots to put these players. So, some of these players are gonna, when the music stops, there may not be chairs.
Yeah.
And they're gonna get a little less than they thought. And so I think Lamoriello is kind of hoping that kind of happens. That
he might be able to do that for like a Calvin DeHaan to fill in on the third pair. He's not going to get Kadri that much less though on an AAV.
Yes, I think that is true because I think there's enough teams like, Calgary has money. I don't know whether Kadri wants to go there, but, Calgary can afford
He
him.
did 3 years ago, but I don't know if it's different.
Yeah.
But swinging back to the 2 Cup finalists, first of all, the decision-making of Julien Brisebois was pretty interesting. Obviously, he signed the younger guys. He signed the 24 and the 25-year-olds. He signed Sergachev. He signed Cirelli. He locked up them long-term on 8 years, Cernak on 8-year terms. But he walked away from Palat, who's 31, and if you look at their roster for next year, he's probably going to walk away from Alex Killorn, who turns, I think, 32, unless they can get him on a sweetheart deal. That was the decision-making process there, Kev. Colorado, I heard yesterday, there's a lot of chatter about them, like if they do try to get Kadri back in, that they're going to trade Sam Girard because they're going to have to pay Bowen Byram next year. So it's with these teams, it's like, okay, I'd love to keep everybody, but I have to make tough choices, and these are the choices I'm going to make.
Yeah. What league does this remind you of, Russ? It's starting to seem like the NFL where where you're just making decisions based on the money. And, one of the issues in the NFL, they've sort of educated and taught their fan base. So, when people lose top players, they go, what are you going to do? It's a cap issue. What are you going to do?
Right.
Don't get married to these guys.
Yeah. But that's not the way hockey fans are. So you're going to have to retrain them if this is what you're going to do, because that they don't have that NFL. What are you going to do? It's a cap.
Well, yeah, you're right. It's a little different. I think. Look, they're very passionate football fans too, but I think the average passionate hockey fan is more passionate than the average passionate football fan. I would say that, and more fanatical about it. And that's why I think, when we're talking about the Islanders, basically, if they're able to make this move that you're talking about, which will be very hard if they don't, they're basically saying, listen, we got Romanov, and you're going to have to hope that, we're the same team we were 2 years ago, and that's it. And, that's not the easiest of sell right now to that fan base, because that's a lot more hope with a brand new coach than there was before.
Yeah. I don't believe for a minute, though, that's Lou's plan. I think he's got some cards,
and then we might change our minds based on what he does.
He's not standing pat. I know that. So
no, okay. I'm not going to go down the offer sheet road because we know it's all bunk. We know, unless it's Carolina and Montreal, there are not going to be any offer sheets, in spite of the fact that, Jake Ottinger is out there and Jason Robertson. Those deals are going to end up getting done. It's like Haley's Comet. An offer sheet comes around that often. But there are situations that are yet unresolved, Kev, that I'm wondering whether they get resolved this summer or it's going to wait until the trade deadline, like Matthew Tkachuk. We know that Goudreau leaves. He goes to Columbus. Now Matthew Tkachuk is an arbitration-eligible RFA. I believe he filed for arbitration on Sunday. So he could accept the qualifying offer and just then walk to free agency. But is Brad Treliving going to let him do that? Or do they need a resolution before the season starts? Otherwise, it goes down like the John Tavares road and he walks away.
Well, I used to think that, it made a lot more sense to sell them beforehand that you'd get. But I had this discussion with the general manager about this very subject. And he said, why do you think that? He said, we've seen some amazing returns on rental players. He said, the only risk is he could get hurt.
Right.
That is the risk. But he said, and then you have time to try to, talk to him and work through it. But, I don't think you're going to change Tkachuk's mind. I think he's going to do what he's going to do, and he'll know this summer.
I think he's made his mind up a year ago. I don't even think.
Well, that could be. But I would trade him this summer. But, the second issue is nobody's in position to make that deal for what you want to get back. Like he said, don't they got to get back a player now that can help them? And it's got to be a good player. And who's going to give that player off their roster? You know,
Well, okay.
The only thing I would say is this, Kev, and this, and I get what you're saying, and maybe they have to wait a little while or even till the deadline, but they can't let Kachuk go the way they let Gaudreau go. If they get nothing for both of those guys, that is devastating. That would be devastating.
I completely agree. I completely agree with that, and that's why I think I wouldn't take the risk that he's going to get hurt, even though I think you could get a pretty good return, next year, because he's the type of guy too that if you're a contender trying to win it all, like, boy, he can certainly be a missing piece. And it's a little easier to fit a guy in that late in the season than it is maybe now, where
Well, the balance here is, you've got control over him for a year, like as Calgary does. You get more trading him now to a team that is content with him being a 1-year rental, saying, like, I'm the Rangers. I'm going to take a chance at the Stanley Cup. I'm willing to trade Capo Caco and Niels Lundqvist and a first-round pick to take a shot at a Stanley Cup and bring in Kachuk, knowing that he's going to St. Louis next year. You get more for him now than you would at the deadline. I think you get more for him now because it's a full year. Or do you get more for him now from a team like the Rangers, or do you get more for him from St. Louis, who he supposedly wants to go to, and say you get Jordan Kyrou in a trade for Matthew Tkachuk? That's the balance that Brad Treliving has to.
I guess it's going to be like an NBA trade, though. It's going to have to balance the books both ways,
right?
Because not everybody has cap space, so it's going to have to be an NBA type trade.
I think the Rangers are afraid to trade our friend Capo.
I think they would have done it already. I think.
They don't seem willing to trade him.
Yeah, I think that was a lot of talk because of the way they sort of worked at the end of the season, but it hasn't happened. So I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, and then the other issue too is, and this is one. I mean, we think that we know that Tkachuk wants to leave Calgary and that maybe wants to go to St. Louis. But we also thought that about his brother.
Yeah.
And his brother stayed in Ottawa. Now, his brother is as American as Chevrolet and apple pie. And yet he stayed in Ottawa. Well, why wouldn't, Matthew Tkachuk, if he'll stay there? I mean, is Gaudreau big enough for him to say, well, we're not trying to win?
I think I can give you the reason why I think his brother stayed in Ottawa, and that was because he was the man. It was like they drafted him. He's the franchise guy. He's got all the attention. It's never going to get any better than that.
But I think Matthews the man.
Yeah, Matthews the man there now.
I mean, he is, but I don't think he's the man on a great team. And I think he's going to look at that and say, if I go to St. Louis, they can win another cup.
Well,
Calgary can win a cup with the way that this team is.
No, I mean, I think that's fair, but I don't, I wouldn't want to say what,
No, I mean, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, if you went to him and said, we'll give you a 8-year deal at $10 million a year, would he say no?
Well, they should be doing it right now, to be honest.
They might be. I mean,
that's
the lesson to be learned from the Gaudreau situation.
Right. They didn't react quick enough to Gaudreau. They let a whole year go by, and he had his best year of his career. Do you want to do the same thing with Tkachuk? What if all of a sudden Tkachuk gets 40 goals this year, and they do the same thing and they put the same money on the table mid-season? He might laugh at it.
Yeah.
Now, a similar situation, Patrick Laine in Columbus, RFA with Arbrights, 1 year or 2 years away from UFA. But the question there is, Kevin, we've been talking about this for a year. Does he want to stay in Columbus? We heard rumors about, Ack is talking about rumors of him going to LA. Now, can they afford him with Gaudreau? And they're up again. They're close to the cap that they'd have to clear salary to sign Laine. But the big overriding question is, does he want to stay? Yeah,
I mean, I've been told yes, but we'll see. They believe he's sincere. He, I had heard about LA, and that was a long time when he was in Winnipeg. There was talk that he wanted to go to LA, but he has indicated he likes it there in the small town and, all that. So, I mean, we'll see. There's no deal. So until you see it on the dotted line, but he's saying all the right things. And, he certainly had that period when he was unbelievable last season. So I know they want to get him. I think they have the money for sure to pay him.
Well, they only have 2.3. They still have to sign Bemstrom too, but they can maybe do something to get out of that.
Yeah, they got guys that they're more than willing to move. So, I
they're
think
gonna have to move somebody though, like Gavrikov makes 2.8. He's pretty good. Someone will definitely take him for a year.
I think Nyquist. I think Nyquist is the guy they probably want to move.
Yeah, but who's gonna take that salary?
Yeah, no, but they can move. I think they've got a plan for that.
But and then the other situations are the Patrick Kane situation. I don't know whether that's a deadline move or a summer move. I would almost think, Kev, with his pedigree and him putting up another year like he did last year, that Chicago, the Kyle Davidson, probably would get more closer to the deadline than he'd get right now.
Yeah, maybe. That's a possibility. But you risk injury. But he's been durable, so you've got that in your favor. I think Kane will compete hard because that's who he is, even though they got no chance. I think the Rangers can make that work now, though, if you trade it, if you wanted to make that trade.
I think Colorado could too.
I don't know if the Rangers are going to rush into that. I really don't. I think they would be more comfortable waiting until the deadline because, look, Patrick Kane would be great. I think they probably want to see what they've got first because, again, if they look really good without Patrick Kane, why give up the farm for Patrick Kane? Like that's going to be the debate.
Yeah, sure would Panarin and Kane and Trocheck though, or
yeah, but it's really short term. Like that's what the old short term Rangers used to do. And then when Patrick Kane, retires or he's gone, then all of a sudden it's like, wait, where are all our assets? What happened to this great team?
Right.
It'll be like the 97 Rangers before you know it, where they had no chance of winning a cup, but they had Gretzky and Messier, and so what?
Yeah, but first round picks where they're going to pick next year, I'd give that up for sure. And I would give up one of their younger players.
But you're going to have to give up Kakko, and if they ask for Lafreniere, I wouldn't do it.
No, I wouldn't do it either. But I don't think they will. I mean, there is you don't trade number one picks. You just don't.
No.
So I don't even.
Yakupov is the only one.
Yeah, no, it's just not going to happen. So.
Right.
The other one that springs to mind here is Pierre-Luc Dubois, and the thing about now it came out over the weekend, and I don't know whether this is.
We have no idea. Yeah.
We don't know. We have no idea whether this talk of I want to play for the Montreal Canadiens is BS or just rumor, or I even hesitate to bring it up a little bit, but we may as well just talk about it briefly as sort of fodder. But Winnipeg's in a weird situation here because it's not like his contract is up after this year. He's got 2 more years, but he's made it clear that I'm not staying.
He's not going back to Winnipeg. We know
right.
that.
Right. So, right here, it's like, okay, what does Winnipeg do? They clearly have it's not a depreciating asset because you still have 2 years of the guy, and he's a very good player, but he's made it painfully aware that he doesn't want to stay. So do they trade him for someone who they think will stay, or do they just stay the course, ride the 2 years out?
This is their 1 year window, and they have a new coach, and they're going to see they have mostly the same team. And I think they're going to ride with it and hope for the best.
But they've gone down this road before, Russ.
But they have a different coach.
Right. No, I'm talking about the organization has gone. Kev,
yeah, I know.
They've gone down this road with Jacob Trouba. And
but there's no risk.
No, there's not risk.
There's no risk. They are not a destination team, and they know that. That's why Cheverdayoff has had to always make trades with term. But there does become a point where it's like, they kind of have to roll the dice and just see what you have this year. If it's not working out, sure, you could trade Dubois at the deadline. But if you have to trade Dubois and Scheifele, you're almost starting over there because good luck attracting a big name free agent again.
Yeah, it was The Athletic that reported that he was in Montreal at the NHL draft because he thought he was going to get traded to Montreal on the draft at the draft on the draft floor, and it didn't come to fruition. So that's what the genesis of that.
That's a hope. I mean, anybody can hope for stuff.
Right. Well, yeah.
That's pretty flimsy.
I hope for stuff all the time. It just don't.
No offense to The Athletic. That's pretty flimsy.
But I mean, okay, Kev, this is after seeing, and we always talk about teams getting players for nothing, but we saw it in the last week with Max Pacioretty and Dylan Coghlan being traded to Carolina for future considerations, and Matt Murray being traded to Toronto for future considerations, which will be zero. Let's ask this question. Is the window for the Vegas Golden Knights closed?
I think they think it isn't. I guess we got to see where their goaltending is next year. They still, now they've got Eichel, they've got Pacioretty, they've got Stone, but he's going to start the season late. Yeah. They got Riley Smith. They got a lot of really good players. So I think they're in it. But when you got to give up a $7 million player, and by the way, I know that's legal. I know there's no rules against it, but it just feels wrong. It feels like there should be some rule that says if you move a player for $7 million, it's like compensation. Like there should be, something has to change hands. I don't know. Maybe there's that you could
just think about this, Kev. I mean, like you say, on paper they should be a team that could make the playoffs. If they don't, I think they're dead in the water then for a while.
Yeah, although they got Brendan Brisson is a good young player. They've got some youngsters that can play, they're going to be credible for a while, but whether or not they'll be serious contenders, Eichel's still a young man.
I know, but he may end up in the same situation in 3 years.
Could.
Yeah, and I do get what you're saying, Kev, about these deals feeling a little dirty. It's like I can't remember who it was, but there was a player who was traded for future considerations, and the future considerations was the same player. He was sent back to the team as as the future considerations. Another one was traded for like a Zamboni, or it was things like that. It's like that has happened in the past. So.
With the Norris's family used to own teams, and they would ship players, back and forth. And what if you just had two best friends that were general managers, and the guy said, well, I'm going to get fired next year anyway, so I'm going to ship you, Connor McDavid and Draisaitl for future considerations. Well, would that be legal? Because it is under the rules. Would they stop that for the good of the game? That's an exaggeration, obviously.
Sure.
But the point is, it just doesn't feel right when nothing comes back in return in a salary cap league. And the argument, of course, is, which someone did make to me, is that the salary cap prevents shenanigans because it's not really for nothing. The Carolina has to have the cap space in order to fit him in, and they receive benefit because they no longer have to deal with his salary. So there is actually compensation, and I understand that. I'm just saying the perception of it is that it seems a little sleazy. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. A general manager could trade Connor McDavid and Draisaitl, but that team would have to have $21 million in available cap space,
right,
to make that deal possible. So
we do have breaking news, Mike. The Flyers and the Minnesota Wild got the Dillman Award this year for the best PR staffs. That's I don't deal with Minnesota a lot. Obviously, I deal with the Flyers, and Zach Hill is retiring after this year. He's sort of retired now, but they're going to let him sort of be around his 30th season, I think it is, for him. So that's a great way to go out on top. That's really nice.
Yeah, that is well deserved.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we'll call it there. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.